I was 18 years old when my mom Claire chose to marry Daniel. The most thrilling and challenging period of my life had just ended. The university entrance tests. Their wedding didn't initially have much of an impact on me. The truth is that all I wanted was for my mom to be happy. Kind and patient, Daniel gave off the impression that he was a nice guy. Ethan, his son, though, I'll let you tell you about that. At the time, Daniel's son Ethan from his first marriage was a mere 15 years old. He was still a lovely adolescent, albeit he exhibited some more immature traits like shyness and defiance. Little time was spent with him. While I was off getting ready for college, he largely avoided leaving his room. Even though we shared a home, I never stopped thinking of him as Daniel's son. Just another cog in the wheel. The academic year began. I began a new chapter in my life by relocating to a different city. I thought everyone would change, including Ethan, during my 4 years away. Yet I had no idea it would have such an impact on me. I felt like a mature woman with a degree and ambitions galore when I returned home at the age of 22. But I discovered that I wasn't prepared for some of the next challenges, regardless of how much I believed I had matured. Suddenly, Ethan had grown up and wasn't that timid, naive boy. At the age of 19, he had changed irrevocably. He stood taller and seemed more assured than I did. Yet there was something about the expression on his face that made me uneasy. The precise instant it hit me is something I will never forget. We sat at home one night by ourselves. Daniel and Mom were gone. In the kitchen, I was reaching for a snack when Ethan came walking by, reaching into a cabinet for something. I still don't understand why my breath caught in my chest during that seemingly ordinary motion. But I felt like he was paying attention to me just then. Those eyes. Olivia, please. Are you all right? His voice was strangely low as he inquired. For want of a better word, I was taken aback. With a simple nod, I departed from the kitchen. At that same second, things began to shift. Mind games ensued, despite my repeated reminders that he was still only my stepbrother. This is something I can't put my finger on, but it's true. That Ethan was more than just Daniel's kid had changed everything. The dawning of my greatest personal crisis began with that realization. The getaway to Marcus's villa that we had planned. My dad has a friend named Marcus. How was I to predict the outcome of such place? Be sure to subscribe and enable notifications if you would like to have early access to these intriguing secrets. See the film through to its conclusion. The conclusion is about to get really strange. There were 4 of us seated at the table that night. This is my family: Claire, Ethan, Daniel, and my mom. As usual, the discussion was mundane. While Mom filled us in on her day, Daniel spilled the beans about his job. While we were eating, Ethan looked up from his plate every so often to hear us. Suddenly, Daniel's mood brightened as dinner drew to a close. Is Marcus Villa still fresh in your minds? Is that so? He inquired. A boyhood friend of Daniel's was Marcus. I had crossed paths with him on multiple occasions. He wowed, yet he was overly showy. Which villa would you like? As she set down her spoon, my mom inquired. The big one, Daniel exclaimed, his expression betraying his immense enthusiasm. This one by the pool overlooks the water. We should go since Marcus has mentioned he is free this week. We could easily spend an entire week there. Anyone can do it. Seeing that made my mom's face light up. Is that right? That is just incredible, Daniel. A vacation like this has been much needed for me. We all require that, Daniel remarked and nodded. Ollie, you're a new graduate. It's helpful for you since you'll have a chance to unwind. Ethan was the first person my mom looked to. She assured Ethan that this vacation would be wonderful for both of them. Before beginning something new, it will help you cleanse your head. Before shrugging, Ethan glanced at my mom. Perhaps he whispered. At the table I stood motionless. I had to own deep down that the concept was fascinating. On the other hand, this discomfort was present. Having Ethan stay with us for an entire week in Marcus's world-renowned villa. I didn't understand. Without intending to be overt, I stole a quick look across the table at him. He was staring at his food. However, his countenance betrayed something. Almost as if he were desperate for this getaway. Plus, for some reason that just added to my unease. We finally reached the spot that would alter the course of my life for the following 7 days after traveling for 2 days. I was pleasantly surprised by how magnificent Marcus Villa looked. A vast pool glistened in the grounds, and the villa's enormous windows revealed views of the ocean. There was no flaw in sight. My mom exclaimed in wonder at the beauty of this place. Daniel instructed us to get comfortable in our rooms, while he unloaded the luggage from the vehicle. He assured me that Claire and I would be staying in the master suite below. Upstairs, you little ones will remain. 2 adjacent rooms are at your disposal. Upstairs, Ethan snatched his suitcase and set off. I trailed behind him, my pulse pounding. Those rooms were literally next beside one another. Pair for Ethan and I. Ethan flung open the door, deposited his bag inside the room, and then glanced over at me. His expression betrayed his desire to speak, yet he refrained. I retreated to my own room, shut the door firmly, and paused to catch my breath. For an entire week we remained here. Ethan and I were upstairs, while my mom and Daniel were below. This trip would alter the course of my life in ways I could never have imagined. Everyone was worn out that day. We were all exhausted from the long drive, and after settling into the property, Daniel and my mom went to their room and promptly went to sleep. Ethan retired to his room in hushed tones, and I found myself contemplating life on my own. The air in my room was stuffy, despite its size and comfort. I sat down at the window and inhaled deeply. Glamorous scenery awaited outside. A gentle swaying of the palm trees was accompanied by the reflection of the pool lights on the water. I just couldn't resist. I retrieved a drink from the kitchen and proceeded downstairs. I uncorked the beer as I reclined on the poolside lounger. I was completely disorganized. What about Ethan? Even though he pretended nothing had transpired before retiring to his room, the silent looks we shared at the table continued to unsettle me. My frustration with myself was overwhelming. This isn't the kind of thing that should be affecting me. At that very moment I perceived motion within. There was light in the kitchen. As he drank from his glass, Ethan was drowsy. I got off the lounger as fast as lightning since I didn't want him to catch a glimpse of me. I was very careful to not tread too heavily. I felt my heart about to explode as I shut the door. Even after burying myself in the covers, I still couldn't get any rest. It felt as if I were attempting to put off the inevitable. The following day, my mom and Daniel went swimming in the afternoon, right before the sun went down. Joking around as they swam, they were clearly enjoying themselves. Sitting on a lounger, Daniel shouted, "Come on, you guys," as he watched my mom in the water. "Inside, we'll start cooking dinner shortly, so you'll have plenty of time as well." We met eyes simultaneously, Ethan and I. Putting our swimwear on and silently making our way to the pool, we rose from our seats. As the sun dipped below the horizon, it lowered its final rays upon the ocean. There was complete stillness as soon as Mom and Daniel from the pool and entered the villa. At first, there was some space between us when we entered the water. I could feel my muscles easing in the chilly water. While Ethan was off in the corner playing with his hair, I stole a quick look at him. He had a strong physique. He seemed so much more assured now that he had passed his awkward teenage years. His eyes were fixed on mine. I felt a flutter go through my body whenever his gaze landed on my bikini top and legs. Despite my initial unease, I ended up kind of enjoying it. "You look so serious," he exclaimed with a smile. I retorted that you're quiet for the most part. He then jumped into the water and began swimming over to me. His words were filled with laughter as he drew me into his embrace, promising to make you laugh right now. He picked me up and threw me into the pool without giving me a chance to react. Before I started laughing uncontrollably as soon as I came to my feet, I shouted as I fell. "You wanted this." I shouted as I swam over to him. Seizing the nape of his neck, I ascended onto his shoulders. As Ethan lifted me into his arms, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. However, we were being drawn inexorably toward something by these subtle hints. His hands were warm and I could feel his shoulders strong. It was as if time stood still the second our gazes locked. There were more than 2 people in the water for the spell to work. There was more than just a smile on Ethan's face when he looked at me. It seemed as if we were both anticipating that the game's trajectory would change. We continued to have a great time splashing around in the pool. Every time I tried to swim away from Ethan, he would make a rapid move, swim circles around me, and then dunk me. Every time we were laughing together, we were drawing nearer. It felt more personal with each splash and giggle. Ethan abruptly dragged me underwater at one point. I couldn't believe it as he drenched my head. I remained motionless in the water, clinging tenaciously to his hands. I was out of breath as he swiftly hauled me back up. The distance between us shrank as my gaze remained fixed on his, and the water trickled off my body. His smile betrayed his sincere desire to grant your wish. My voice was nearly muted when I uttered the words, my heart racing as my palms met the water's surface. I emphasized that wanting it is distinct. All of a sudden we were standing face to face. Both of our arms were submerged in the water, and we were standing very close to one another. Just for a second time stood still. Our only sound was the pounding of our hearts in the ethereal stillness. Our gazes met. We were so close together that the frigid water no longer registered. There was a complete disarray in my emotions. The same passion and perplexion were visible in Ethan's eyes as mine. There was a split second when neither of us could breathe, and it seemed like the world was collapsing around us. We were almost touching, but our bodies were too close. In this fleeting instant, everything seemed to hinge on the possibility of a single touch. With each stride I took on the water's surface, Ethan drew nearer, his eyes fixed on me. "Just breathe," he murmured. As soon as he said that, my breath stuck in my throat. Another step was taken by us. As I locked eyes with him as he dipped his arms into the water, a shift began to occur within me. I could feel that our next move might alter the course of events because we were so near. In the water, Ethan hesitated for a second before slowly extending his hands. At that very second, as his fingers delicately traced across the water, he fixed his gaze on me. Without realizing it, my hands drifted toward his, and I froze for an instant before giving in to the irresistible pull of his touch. My pulse rate increased as soon as our palms touched. A tremor was permeating my entire being. It seemed as though time stood still before our very eyes. Another step wasn't necessary. Being in such close proximity was sufficient. My heart was already racing at that point. I was completely overwhelmed by the depth of my emotions. Ethan drew nearer, his grip on my hands growing stronger. I wanted to express my emotions to him for an instant, but I quickly disregarded the thought. Things had to spiral out of hand. I stared into his eyes, allowing my inner turmoil to control my every move. After that, I softly brought my lips to meet his, quite unintentionally. There was a halt to time at that stroke. In that 1 second, everything happened. We could practically hear one another's heartbeats as our hearts raced. As I shut my eyes, I let myself be completely absorbed in the here and now. A one touch had transformed everything. Outside, Daniel's voice came to us at that very moment. "Everyone, supper is ready. Come on, kids." All of a sudden, things began to feel normal again. The comfort of that moment vanished as if it had never existed. We resisted the need to meet one another's gaze. We subdued those sentiments, that warmth, and began to eat in silence. We were both well aware of how much it would mean to us, but we opted to be quiet, staring at our meal instead of each other. Nobody said a word while they were eating. It was as if the enchantment of that instant had evaporated and life had returned to its usual routine. But now things were different. I could sense that something was off even in the stillness. It was becoming too much for me. For some reason, I felt the need to exit the room. I wanted a break since it seemed like a lot had built up inside of me. With my heart still racing, I softly pushed open the door and made my way down the corridor. Concurrently, Ethan's door swung open. Neither of us looked at the other as we stood there. In that split second, everything had taken on new significance, and although our emotions were identical, it appeared like an insurmountable obstacle to overcome. For an instant, there was no way out of our locked gaze but to stare at one another. In that instant, words failed us, but our emotions were crystal clear. Our hands instinctively drifted toward one another in the blink of an eye. Words, the cries that from my chest, vanished. We were so close that our breaths became a mixture when I took that one step. Ethan kept staring at me and I was at a loss for words. "It was very evident what we both needed," I said to Ethan, my voice quivering. In order to get closer to him, I stepped forward one more time. As our eyes met in a silent understanding, I proceeded to take a further step. And then out of nowhere I saw how excited Ethan was, and I drew myself over to him. As soon as our lips touched, time stood still. For an instant there was no one else around, just the two of us. My pulse quickened, my grip relaxed, and I sensed the impending disaster. In a flash, our connection was completely broken. After a while, I was reluctant to back down. Everything else paled in comparison to the intensity and joy of that instant. Something inside of me began to rise even higher as Ethan's hands encircled my waist. We walked step by step toward my room until Ethan led the way and the door closed behind us. There we were together. I felt a fleeting sense of disorientation when Ethan lay next to me. What we had said, done, and touched still seemed strange to me in some ways. Still clenched in tension, I stared at the ceiling. Everything appeared normal with Ethan resting next to me, but the anarchy inside of me never subsided. My gaze strayed to his attire after some time had passed. Near the spot where I had discarded my bikini, lying in a disorganized heap, were Ethan's shirt and shorts. They were in the far corner of the room. When did he discover that I was here? How had we arrived at this point? Inquiries flooded my thoughts. It seemed like I had to act normally for the remainder of the vacation, even though something was obviously wrong. Spending time with my loved ones, particularly my mom and Daniel, was burdensome. As I hid it, the reverberation of what had transpired with Ethan intensified within me. I did my best to stay away from them and avoided them at all costs. After about 5 minutes of being in their company, I felt ashamed and couldn't bear to be there any longer. Ethan was the only person on my mind, but getting near enough to him made it impossible to articulate or explain how I felt. I don't know how to break this news to my loved ones. Olivia, a 22-year-old who was treated like a child, was all that I was to them. Everything was different after what happened with Ethan. Ethan exhibited a remarkable blend of comprehension and confusion. The difference between his words and his emotions was enormous. Although he appeared composed on the outside, he was aware that something was off on the inside. Our unspoken understanding amounted to a wish that things would remain unchanged. Everything was moving in a different way, though, and I was having no control over it. Throughout the whole vacation, we failed to grow closer to one another. There seemed to be a barrier despite our smiling and talking, an impassable wall of unfathomable size. Everything else grew mundane, with the exception of the brief encounters with Ethan. Still, I couldn't help but dwell on those brief moments of touch, and the way our eyes connected. My emotions poured out like a torrent. However, I was bewildered by all that was going on. What came next was completely unclear to me. Nothing from that night and the events that followed were ever able to escape my memory. At that point, I was at a loss as to how to proceed. My family and I were closer than we had ever been before. I had to repress my feelings for Ethan, along with my anxieties and concerns. On the other hand, there were cries deep within me that no one could hear. Perhaps those who knew the answers were only waiting for the perfect time to reveal them. I ended up someplace else because of all this. There was a singular object in the shadows when I shut my eyes. Moving forward, where would that future lie, though? Would we become closer, Ethan and I? Alternately, would everything gradually disappear? You must have felt the impact of my story if you have come this far. There's a lot to tell, and you won't want to skip a beat. Please leave a comment, enable notifications, and click the follow button. Leave a comment with your opinions. I'm extremely interested in hearing them. I am incredibly grateful for your support.